Allow myself to introduce myself. I'm Jessie Coffield, and this is football panel number 2 of the day. DraftKings contributor Pearce, Dietrich, and Rotowire's Scholz, and it is time for NFL Thursday night best bets. You two are going to lay down your favorite bets in tonight's Washington-New York game. So Pearce, the home team, Washington favored by 3.5 points. Do you like them to bounce back this week and perhaps cover here?
I do. I'm surprised by this line. It opened at 4. We're seeing movement towards 3. People like the Giants. I don't get that at all. Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback. His line is not good. I think Barkley is overrated, and they're playing on the road against a very good defense. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think it's a bit of an overreaction. People think Fitzpatrick was, I guess, a god or something. You take him out of this lineup, they're not that bad. Heineke's numbers last week were pretty good as well. I like Washington in this spot.
AJ, do you agree? You like Washington here?
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, for me, it's less about Washington, having a bounce back performance and more about the Giants continuing to be bad. I mean, as Pearce mentioned, Saquon Barkley might not even play. He's questionable. Evan Ingram's also got an injury. So even if they both play, I think it's clear they're not at 100%. So for me, I would consider looking at the alternate lines here. You can get Washington as high as -4.5, and that'll bring back +110 value. So I really like that spot to move away from that line because, like Pearce, I think this is a too low of a spread here.
All right, so AJ, the total in this one is like super low, 41. There's a lot of injuries on both sides. We talked about how Saquon might not even play. So what are the chances that we hit the over here?
Well, for a lot of the same reasons, I like the under on this one as well. The injuries, the bad offense for the Giants here. Yeah, it's the lowest total on week 2. But Washington, for their part, they managed just 259 yards of total offense in week 1. That was 6th worst in the league. The Giants didn't fare much better, 314 yards of offense. Look, and especially if Barkley is ruled out, say what you will. Pearce, obviously not a huge fan, but if he's out of this game, I would expect this total to possibly dip even lower if it comes out early enough that he's not going to play, because he probably is the biggest driver of their offense if he's in the game.
All right, Pearce, what do we think? We rolling with the under here?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the under as well. And this reminds me a lot of last year, week 3, Miami at Jacksonville. Everyone predicted a terrible low-scoring game, and people were down on Miami. They were high on Jacksonville. And Jacksonville laid an egg. Miami was great. Fitzpatrick put up 21 points in that first half, and really that's the big takeaway. But we forget that was a terrible low-scoring game when it was all said and done. The over-under was 49. Only 44 points were put on the board, and everyone was right. 2 bad offenses on a Thursday night, and they didn't do much. I would expect we see the same thing. And imagine, hey, the Giants somehow surprise us and their offense goes off. Or maybe Washington has a great night and they surprise us as well with Heineke at quarterback. But what are the chances that both offenses erupt? It's probably unlikely. So if one offense has a good game, it's still not going to be enough to carry the over. So I say hit the under, just like week 3 last year.
All right, like we said, Taylor Heineke is getting the start for Washington with Fitzpatrick sadly injured. So Pearce, what's your favorite quarterback prop for this one?
You start to question some of your career choices when you're debating Tyler Heineke props. You might need to take the degrees off the wall. But that being said, I like the under on Heineke here at 250. He hasn't had a lot of time to prepare. He's not really that great of a quarterback. It's a divisional game. They're at home. There's no reason to pump up the volume. He can be efficient. He can be effective. But any Washington quarterback in this spot, Joe Theismann, Mark Rippon, I would take the under on yardage in this spot.
All right, AJ, what's your favorite quarterback prop?
Well, it's in a similar vein, not going the yardage, but overall attempts for Tyler Heineke here. It's under 34.5 is what I'm going to look at, -125 on the DK Sportsbook there. Look, part of it comes from the news that Antonio Gibson was a full practice participant yesterday. And I would expect Washington to run the ball as much as possible to take the pressure off Heineke in this spot. You look at last week, the 2 Washington QBs combined for just 21 passing attempts. I wouldn't expect too much more than that, so I like the under on Heineke's attempts here.
All right, AJ, what's your favorite running back or wide receiver prop for this one?
Well, it should be obvious here that I'm pretty high on Antonio Gibson heading into this game in terms of the available players, right? So I'm looking at his rushing yard totals. You can get over 66.5 at -115. He reached that easily with 90 yards in week 1, and that was with just 20 attempts. Again, I would expect more touches for him in this week. If that one scares you off a little bit, you're not so sure. He did have 3 catches in week 1, so you could go his overall rushing and receiving over as well. I like that one.
All right, Pearce, talk to me.
I'm going to stick with the other Washington running back and go with J.D. McKissic over 13.5 rushing yards. That's a pretty low number, especially if we're predicting this is going to be a conservative run-the-ball game. You've got a quarterback who is just being thrusted into the lineup. There's not enough time to change the game plan. You're going to want to have the simplest game plan as possible, and that would probably be a lot more running. And, hey, guess what? Giants, not very good against the rush. They gave up 146 yards on the ground last week. That was the second most. McKissic played 36% of the snaps. I think he's going to play a little bit more. He should get a little bit more action as well. And on a short week, I wouldn't imagine that Ron is going to really run Gibson into the ground, maybe give him a little bit of a breather. So I like McKissic on the over.
All right, it is Slate Approved pick time, fellas. So, Pearce, what is your favorite bet for tonight?
I'm going to parlay that McKissic over 13.5. Repeat, 13. He got 8 yards on 1 carry last week. So give him 2 to 3 carries and he's got it. Parlay that with a 2.5 reception total. If we expect this to be a pretty conservative, low-scoring, bad game, that means there should be plenty of third and longs. And if there's third and longs, that means we're going to see McKissic in receiving opportunities. Also, if this thing shoots out or for whatever reason Washington's offense plays well, that only bodes well for him to run the ball more, get more yards, and get more yards on the or through the air.
All right, AJ, where are we going? Slate Approved.
Well, I have to give a shout out to Pearce here and looking at that McKissic one, because if you look at the overall rush yards, Daniel Jones over under is actually higher at 21.5. So I do have to give Pearce a little bit of credit there for picking up on that. I like Gibson over 15.5 rush attempts. As I said, I think he'll get plenty of opportunities. I do agree, short week, maybe they scale it back a little bit, but he had 20 in week 1. I would expect that to easily hit this week at over 15.5.